Ministers, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's 08:40 in the morning on Sunday, the 2nd of June, and it is time for our fifth plenary session, our first plenary session of this second day of the 18th IISS Shangri-La Dialogue. We welcome also into the hall today His Excellency Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, and we would all like to thank the President of Singapore for the marvelous reception and dinner she hosted for the delegates to the 18th IISS Shangri-La Dialogue yesterday evening. I might open this morning's proceedings simply by sending the condolences of all of us at IISS.org, the Shangri-La delegates, to the family of former First Lady of Indonesia, Ani Yudhoyono, who sadly died yesterday in Singapore, where she had long been under treatment for cancer to which she ultimately succumbed. We send our condolences to her family and to the delegation from Indonesia. The IISS is extremely proud today to receive at the Shangri-La Dialogue General Wei Fenghe, the State Councilor and Minister of National Defense of China. General Wei was born in Shandong Province. He joined the People's Liberation Army in 1970, so he has been part of the People's Liberation Army for nearly half a century. He is a member of the 19th CPC Central Committee, a member of the Central Military Commission of the People's Republic of China, the most senior Chinese delegate that we have received at the Shangri-La Dialogue, and we're honored by his presence here today. General Wei Fenghe and I have already had several conversations over the last 36 hours. I know that he has conducted many formal and informal bilateral and multilateral meetings. His presence here and his participation shows the Chinese commitment to defense diplomacy in the Asia-Pacific, for which we are all thankful. I would like now to invite General Wei Fenghe to deliver his plenary address on the theme China and International Security Cooperation. General Wei, the floor is yours.
It gives me great pleasure to attend the 18th Shangri-La Dialogue. I would like to thank Dr. John Chipman for inviting me here, and thank the Singapore government, its Ministry of Defense in particular, for the warm hospitality. I would also like to congratulate His Excellency Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong on his excellent keynote address the other day. This is my first attendance at the Shangri-La Dialogue as China's Defense Minister. I'm here for mutual confidence, cooperation, and peace. I'm glad to speak on China and international security cooperation. First, humanity is at a crossroad. Building a community with a shared future for mankind is the right path forward and the trend of the times. The world today is undergoing profound changes unseen in a century. Destabilizing, uncertain factors and challenges continue to rise. President Xi Jinping's great vision of building a community with a shared future for mankind is the answer to harmonious coexistence of people across the world, and the effective solution to global problems are the right path towards world peace and human progress. we take note that the U.S. expounded its perspective on regional affairs yesterday. We believe that any such perspective should take into account the common security and interests of regional countries. No approaches to regional issues should resort to military blocs, nor should they undermine the interests of others. We hold different views with the U.S. side on several issues. Regarding the wrong words and actions of the U.S. on Taiwan and South China Sea, we express our firm opposition. Now let's think about the following questions. First, which should we choose? Peace and development or conflict and confrontation? Peace and development remain the core of our times and the trend of history. However, global and regional hotspots flare up one after another, and the risk of conflict and war persists. We see regional wars and conflicts, the spread of terrorism, the chaos in the Middle East, and the refugee crisis in Europe. What is the reason for them? Who are behind all these? And what is the root cause? These are the questions to be reflected on. Some deliberately create division and hostility, provoke confrontation, meddle with regional affairs, interfere in internal affairs of others, and frequently resort to arms. Whose interests on earth do they serve, and whose do they harm? Second, which should we choose? Openness and inclusiveness, or isolation and exclusiveness? See the world with an open and inclusive mind, and there will be friends and partners everywhere. Yet see the world with a narrow and exclusive mind, and there will only be enemies and adversaries. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy. However, lately we see a growing backlash against globalization and a surge of protectionism. A certain country champions unilateralism, puts its own interests before others, and withdraws from international treaties and organizations. Aren't there many countries suffering from the willful infringement and sanctions? Third, which should we choose? Win-win cooperation or zero-sum game? Win-win cooperation makes the pie bigger and brings more benefits to all. However, zero-sum game makes no winner and harms the interests of both sides. Currently, over 150 countries and international organizations have proactively joined China's Belt and Road Initiative. Not long ago, 150 countries and 92 international organizations sent over 6,000 delegates to the Second Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation. People can tell what is right. Fourth, which should we choose? Mutual learning among civilizations or arrogance and prejudice? A few days ago, China successfully hosted the Conference on Dialogue of Asian Civilizations. We believe that human civilizations are and should be colorful, equal, inclusive, and willing to learn from each other. Not a single civilization should be worshipped or belittled. History witnessed the enslavement of Africans, the expulsion of Native American Indians, the colonization in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and the killing of Jewish people. These are scars and tragedies in the history of human civilization which do not go away. Unfortunately, some people recently pick up the decadent idea of the clash of civilizations. As racist and narrow-minded as it is, this is not right. How can we tolerate such a regress of history? Second, facing complex and volatile international security situation, the Chinese government and armed forces stay committed to regional and world prosperity and stability. Those who are familiar with China's modern history must know that the country was once poor and weak and went through enormous misery. The Chinese people know very well the value of peace and the cruelty and destructiveness of war. Over the years, some have been recklessly hyping up, exaggerating, and dramatizing the China threat theory, partly due to the lack of understanding of China's history, culture, and policies, but more likely due to misunderstanding, prejudice, or even a hidden agenda of their own. China sticks to the path of peaceful development. Such a commitment is underpinned by China's socialist system, the independent foreign policy of peace, and the cultural tradition that values peace and harmony. China shall follow the path of peaceful development, which is a solemn commitment to the people of China and the world. This has been written into the Constitution of the Communist Party of China and the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, thus reaffirmed as the will of the CPC and the state. If this is not even convincing enough for some people, then we don't know what they would believe. Over the past 70 years since the founding of the PRC, China has never provoked a war or conflict, nor has it ever invaded another country or taken an inch of land from others. In the future, no matter how strong it becomes, China shall never threaten anyone, seek hegemony, or establish spheres of influence. History has proven and will continue to prove that China will not follow the beaten path of big powers seeking hegemony when it grows strong. Hegemony doesn't conform to China's values and national interests. China adopts a military strategy of active defense. China's military strategy adheres to the principles of defense, self-defense, and post-strike response. It stresses that we will not attack unless we are attacked, but we will surely counterattack if attacked. China develops its military entirely for self-defense. The purpose is to defend the country, provide people with a peaceful working environment, and ensure that our people are free from the disasters of war and enjoy a better life. We have never bullied or preyed on others, and we shall not let others bully, prey on, or invade us either. China develops its military to cope with security threats. Similar scenario can be found in the past, when China had to develop nuclear capabilities of its own under nuclear threat. China's defense expenditure is reasonable and appropriate. China enhances national defense in order to meet the legitimate needs to defend its own security and contribute to the world force for peace. The Chinese military is dedicated to safeguarding national sovereignty, security, and development interests. The PLA is the People's Force under the leadership of the CPC. The PLA has fought many battles and is not afraid of sacrifice. In face of aggression, coercion, or hardships, it has forged ahead from victory to victory. The more severe the pressure and difficulties are, the stronger and braver the Chinese people become. Adversity only brings our nation greater solidarity and strength. As the lyrics of the Chinese national anthem go, "Arise, all those who do not want to be enslaved. Let's build the new Great Wall without flesh and blood." Faced with daunting and complex security challenges, the PLA vows not to yield a single inch of the country's sacred land. But it will not seize anything from others either. The PLA has no intention to cause anybody trouble, but it is not afraid to face up to troubles. Should anyone risk crossing the bottom line, the PLA will resolutely take action and defeat all enemies.
四，中国军队
The Chinese military is committed to safeguarding regional and world security and stability. China is an active supporter of UN peacekeeping operations. It is the largest troop contributor among the permanent members of the UN Security Council and a major contributor of funds. We have established a peacekeeping standby force of 8,000 troops that is ready to be deployed. For years, China has been actively promoting bilateral and multilateral security cooperation. The China-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership of Coordination has been running at a high level. The state-to-state and male-to-male relations between China and the US remain generally stable despite twists and difficulties. We have strengthened a sense of shared future with ASEAN countries, deepened our traditional friendship with India, Pakistan, and other South Asian countries, maintained peaceful coexistence and good neighborliness with surrounding countries, and built good relationships with the countries and militaries of Africa and Latin America. In October this year, China will host the 9th Beijing Xiangshan Forum. We welcome defense and military leaders and scholars from all over the world to attend this forum. The last and the third question. While striving for common prosperity in the Asia-Pacific, we must respect the core interests and accommodate the security concerns of all. China advocates that all countries, big or small, strong or weak, rich or poor, are all equal members of the international community. We should respect and accommodate the legitimate security concerns of one another. China understands and respects the sovereignty and independence and territorial integrity of all countries, and supports the social systems and development paths they independently choose. China is not able to progress in isolation from the rest of the world, and the world also needs China to prosper. We in China do not covet the interests nor envy the development of others. However, we shall never give up our legitimate rights and interests. No country should ever expect China to allow its sovereignty, security, and development interests to be infringed upon. As for the recent trade friction started by the US, if the US wants to talk, we will keep the door open. If they want to fight, we will fight till the end. As what the general public of China says these days, a talk, welcome. A fight, we're ready. Bully us, no way. With that, I would now like to further illustrate China's position on a few issues you may be interested in. First, on Taiwan. The Taiwan question concerns China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Not a single country in the world would tolerate secession. When I visited the US last year, I was told by the American friends that Abraham Lincoln was the greatest American president. I wondered why, and they explained it is so because he led the country to victory in the Civil War and prevented the secession of the US. The US is indivisible, and so is China. China must be and will be reunified. We find no excuse not to do so. If anyone dares to split Taiwan from China, the Chinese military has no choice but to fight at all costs. at all costs for national unity. Hereby, I have a message for the DPP authorities and the external forces. First, no attempts to split China would succeed. Second, any foreign interference in the Taiwan question is doomed to failure. I've taken note of the U.S. speech yesterday, which mentioned Taiwan. I want to ask, is the Taiwan Relations Act a law of Taiwan or law of the U.S.? Is it law of China or an international law? Is it an act of the United Nations? How can U.S. enact a law to interfere in China's internal affairs? Is there any sense in that? Third, any underestimation of the PLA's resolve and will is extremely dangerous. We will strive for the prospect of peaceful reunification with utmost sincerity and greatest efforts, but we make no promise to renounce the use of force. Safeguarding national unity is a sacred duty of the PLA. If the PLA cannot even safeguard the unity of our motherland, then what do we need it for? Second, on the South China Sea. The current situation in the South China Sea is generally stable and positive. It is attributable to the joint efforts of the countries in the region. But there are always people trying to make profits by stirring up troubles in the region. I just paid an official visit to Singapore and Vietnam. I exchanged views with the two defense ministers on the South China Sea issue and reached a lot of consensus. Here I have a few questions concerning the issue to discuss with you. First, who is threatening security and stability in the South China Sea? Over 100,000 ships sail through the South China Sea each year. None has been threatened. The problem, however, is that in recent years, some countries outside the region come to the South China Sea to flex muscles in the name of freedom of navigation. The large-scale force projection and offensive operations in the region are the most serious, destabilizing, and uncertain factors in the South China Sea. Second, who would benefit and who would suffer from the chaos in the South China Sea? In case of chaos in the South China Sea, we, the regional countries, are the ones to take the brunt of it. What are the purposes for certain countries to send military vessels and aircraft all the way from afar to this region? Aren't there enough examples that some big countries intervene in regional affairs, make troubles, walk away, and leave a mess behind? Third, should we count on countries in the region or outside the region for maintaining stability in the South China Sea? China and ASEAN countries have made good progress in negotiating the COC. We hope that relevant parties will not underestimate the wisdom and ability of regional countries to properly handle differences and preserve peace. But of course, we welcome constructive suggestions from all countries. Fourth, is China's construction on its South China Sea islands and reefs militarization? It is the legitimate rights of a sovereign state to carry out construction on its own territory. China built limited defense facilities on the islands and reefs for self-defense. It is only when there are threats will there be defenses. In face of heavily armed warships and military aircraft, how can we not deploy any defense facilities? Thirdly, on the DPRK nuclear issue, China is committed to denuclearization, peace, and stability of the peninsula, and to a negotiated solution through dialogue and consultation. The Chinese side has made active efforts in promoting peace talks and played an irreplaceable constructive role. We hope that the U.S. and the DPRK will accommodate each other's concerns with cool heads and patience, work towards the same goal, and resume the dialogue for peace at an early date. The U.S. and the DPRK need to adopt a dual-track approach and advance denuclearization together with the establishment of a peace mechanism. We hope that the international community will positively respond to the legitimate concerns of the DPRK. trigger the reversible clause of the UN Security Council resolutions in due course, facilitate a declaration on the end of war, and actively build trust among all parties. Fourth, on China-US relations. This year marks the 40th anniversary of China-US diplomatic ties. Despite all the ups and downs, China-US relationship has been steadily growing in the past 40 years. The most valuable lesson we have learned from the 4-decade-long relationship is that cooperation benefits the two sides while confrontation hurts both. Looking forward, the two countries should follow the consensus by the two presidents and promote a China-US relationship featuring coordination, cooperation, and stability. Through continued communication, the militaries of the two countries have agreed on many important issues. First, in terms of implementing the consensus between the two presidents, the two militaries agreed on making their relationship a stabilizer for the overall relations. Second, we agreed on maintaining regular communication on the strategic level. The day before yesterday, I had a candid and practical discussion with Acting Secretary Patrick Shanahan. We reaffirmed the importance of maintaining communication and to develop a constructive male-to-male relationship. Third, in terms of managing risks and preventing conflict, the two sides recognize that military conflict or even a war between them would bring disasters to both countries and the world. It takes two to cooperate, but only one to start a fight. We hope that the US side will work with us towards the same goal, follow the principles of non-conflict, non-confrontation, mutual respect, and win-win cooperation, and steer the China-US relations in the right direction. The achievements we have made in the past 70 years since the founding of the People's Republic of China is not a windfall or a handout from others. Neither was it made by engaging in military expansion or colonial exploitation. Instead, it's been achieved through the hard work, wisdom, and bravery of the Chinese people, as well as through our win-win cooperation with the world since reform and opening up. At present, under the strong leadership of the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, China enjoys political stability, social cohesion, and steady economic growth. With peace, harmony, and governance prevailing in the country, China is making progress on all fronts. The Chinese people are striving to realize the Chinese dream of great national rejuvenation. The Chinese military is ready to work with armed forces of other Asia-Pacific countries to jointly meet challenges, build an Asia-Pacific community with a shared future, and safeguard peace and stability in the region. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, General Wei, for your description of China's active defense and for the two pledges I heard. First, neither to cede an inch of land nor to take an inch of land. And your second pledge that you will respect and accommodate the legitimate security concerns of others while not giving up your own legitimate security concerns. You have attracted so far 15 people interested in making a comment or asking a brisk question. By the agreement that we arrived at yesterday, I will take 4 or 5 questions and comments and then return to you for your response. Given that I've got quite so many, could I please ask all of you to ask a crisp, brief question so we can accommodate as wide and diverse an array of perspectives as possible. With that, could I please ask from Australia, Stephen Smith, your microphone is on.
Thank you, John. Stephen Smith, Perth US Asia Centre, Australia. Minister, thank you for your contribution this morning. I've been coming to Shangri-La dialogues for nearly a decade, and at each Shangri-La dialogue I've attended, I've heard the call from China or elsewhere that the United States needs to adjust or accommodate its approach to take light of and accommodate the rise of China as a great power. In the blink of an eye, historically, over the next 2 to 3 decades, India, the world's largest democracy, will be a great power, and Indonesia, the world's 3rd largest democracy, will be the 4th largest economy in the world and be a global influence, not just a regional influence. How does China propose to adjust to and accommodate the rise of India as a great power and the rise of Indonesia as an international and global influence, not just a regional influence?
Thank you. Lin Kwok.
Thank you very much. You mentioned earlier, General, that the PLA vows not to yield a single inch of the country's sacred land, but it won't seize anything from others either. Now, that's all well and good, but the question, of course, is how valid is China's consideration of what is China's and what is not China's? China has been island building and militarizing in the South China Sea. And you mentioned that it's the legitimate rights of a sovereign state to do so. That's true. However, in the case of the features in the South China Sea that China occupies, sovereignty is highly contested. And in the case of one feature, Mischief Reef, a tribunal actually found that because it's a low tide elevation within the Philippines EEZ, it's within Philippine sovereignty. So I find it hard to understand, if you could explain, please, how China can, on the one hand, say that it won't seize anything from others, and yet feel that countries should be reassured by that promise, because it seems to have a very expansive approach to what belongs to China. Thank you.
Thank you. Henry Boyd.
Thank you, John, and thank you, General, for such an interesting and thought-provoking speech. The speed and scale of the People's Liberation Army's modernization process in recent years has been incredibly impressive. I wondered if you could just say a few words about which areas you think you've seen the greatest progress in this process for in recent years, and which areas still need some more work.
Thank you. Ken Jimbo.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Chipman. General Wei, I'd like to get your perspective on the issue of the U.S.-Russia withdrawal of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces, or INF, treaty on the 2 specific agendas. First of all, United States potential for deployment of the either intermediate or medium range missile, not necessarily nuclear, but conventional forces in Western Pacific. How do you respond to such kind of potential? And secondly, some call for China to join the renegotiated INF treaty like arms control with Washington and Moscow. And currently we heard from Beijing that there will be zero chance for this. But any potential to make your nuclear doctrine, force posture to be more transparent, triggered by this debate?
Thank you very much. I'll take a couple more before coming back to General Wei. Christian Atrianda Supriyanto.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. In his speech, Prime Minister Lee of Singapore acknowledged the stability that the U.S. military power had brought to the region since the end of the Second World War, whereas China's emergence as a new major military power is creating more anxieties in the region. I would like to ask you, General, whether you agree with this statement. Thank you.
And Caroline Atkinson.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you to the General. I have a quick question. All of the other conversations and statements that we've heard from defense ministers here today and yesterday have referred to the value of international norms and a rules-based international order. I wonder if this has any relevance or meaning for China, as this phrase was not in the General's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I still have 7 or 8 people at least who wish to take the floor, and I would like to return to you to ask your questions. So I would now, though, like to invite General Wei to give his response to what he has heard from the floor. General Wei.
Colleagues, thank you for your questions. I'd like to give responses to your questions. Just now, 5 or so questions were raised about China-India relations, about INF, about China's island building, about the international order. Now let me give you some responses. In terms of China-India relations, generally speaking, this relationship is sound. In particular, President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi have provided sound guidance for the relationship, and the comprehensive strategic partnership has enjoyed sound growth. I paid a visit to India last year. The Minister of Public Security, Minister of Foreign Affairs, as well as the Minister of Defense of China all visited India. Our two militaries reached important consensus, that is to properly implement the consensus reached between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi in their informal summit in Wuhan. Both sides are committed to promoting a cooperative and stable relationship between the two sides. The momentum of the relationship is getting better and better, and we are making active efforts to further grow this bilateral relationship. Having said that, we have seen sort of differences in the relationship as well, but the differences cannot be compared to the overall sound cooperation. The Chinese side is ready to work together with India to properly handle the boundary question, and at the moment, the management of the boundary question is sound. The two sides has had close communication with each other, and the border area is generally stable. The common interests of China and India far outweigh our differences. A sound China-India relationship not only serves the interests of both peoples, it is also conducive to stability of the whole world, as China and India are the two biggest developing countries in the world. The male-to-male relationship between the two countries has also enjoyed healthy growth and steady development. Our consensus reached is that the two militaries need to work together to contribute to the overall relationship between China and India.
On the second question, I heard a question about island building. Especially on China's construction on islands and reefs and deployment of military facilities. I think for China to build limited defense facilities, it is totally legitimate. China's islands and reefs in the South China Sea are part of the Chinese territory, and there is no dispute as for China's legitimacy to build facilities on its own territories. But we need to think what is militarization. Building facilities on one's own territories is not militarization. What can be called militarization? I think with some military knowledge, we would know that this is not tantamount to militarization. We are deploying the facilities because we feel the threat, because there is threat. In the past, when conditions were not ripe, our people stationed on the islands and reefs were living in very poor living conditions, but now we have the resources, we will improve their living conditions. We are also improving the facilities on those islands and reefs to provide better services. These are not militarization. Some countries instead have blatantly showed muscles in this region. How can we respond to that? Can we use handguns to cope with such threat? I think it is legitimate for us to respond to such threats by deploying some facilities. As for the development of Chinese military, China has always developed its military to defend its national sovereignty and security. As a major country is China, we follow a defensive policy that is defensive in nature. As I mentioned in my speech, our policy is not to attack anyone if not attacked, but we will surely counterattack if attacked. We must make sure that our people enjoy a better life, enjoy a safe environment of working, and to achieve that we must have a strong army to defend them. Without a strong army, our country will not be safe. In the past, when China was under nuclear threat, blackmail, or threat of use nuclear weapons, China was under the threat of total elimination. And under that circumstances, we were forced to declare our own nuclear arsenal. I was the commander of the rocket force of the Chinese army, so I know it perfectly clear. I think the development of Chinese military is close to the hearts of many, and the one who cares most about. And the issue that is cared about most is whether China wants to seek hegemony by developing its military. I want to make it clear, and I want to invite you to think, who has China invaded? Since the founding of the People's Republic of China, we have never taken the initiative to send our troops to fight a war with another country. And those wars that were forced upon us was fought to defend our sovereignty and security. We have never taken an inch of others' land. China, and second question is, who has China threatened? China is a big country, but we have not bullied smaller countries or weaker countries with our size or strength. China is the only country that has pledged not to use nuclear weapons first. We maintain that issues should not be resolved through use or threat of force. We have not achieved what we have achieved today by military expansion or colonial exploitation. And who is the one that use such approaches to achieve what they have achieved? I think it's clear to many. And China will never do that.
Ask Mayor Nowens. Your mic is on.
Thank you very much, General Wei. My question is about China's strategy of active defense. You said that China will not attack if it is not China will not attack if it is not attacked, but it will surely counterattack if it is attacked. Can you please provide some clarification as to what constitutes an attack on China? Is this kinetic or other? Thank you.
Asanga Abiyagun Sekera.
Thank you, John. When you look at the complex security challenges of the world, I think I draw your attention to Sri Lanka, the Easter Sunday attack, and where we lost 250 lives within 60 minutes actually. I actually witnessed the attack in Shangri-La myself, the bombing. My question is basically China's role in anti-terrorism and violent extremism. What is China's role? And our president's first visit after the attack was to China to strengthen security cooperation. So what is China's role in anti-terrorism as well as violent extremism? Thank you.
Thank you. François Bourg. Go ahead again. Go ahead, Frank.
On Friday evening, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong stated that the lack of strategic trust was at the heart of American-Chinese tension. Now, you, General, have used words like peace, cooperation, stability, development, win-win, but you did not use, unless something got lost in translation, you did not use the word trust. Should we read anything into this omission? And by the way, I asked pretty much the same question to Acting Secretary Shanahan yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shashank Joshi.
Thank you. Yesterday, Minister, one of your colleagues from the floor said that freedom of navigation was conditional. Would you agree? And more specifically, you lambasted the United States, France and Britain for coming from outside the region to stir up trouble, as you put it, in the South China Sea. How do you view that as consistent with Chinese naval and intelligence activity in the exclusive economic zones of other countries outside of the region? How do you square those two beliefs?
Sarah Basit.
Thank you so much. At the opening of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, some got worried, while others gained great hopes of a more stable Pakistan, specifically when it comes to economic growth and the fight against terrorism. So my question is, how does China view its role in the region as a hegemon? Is it cautious and efficient, or would you describe it in another way? Thank you.
Thank you. Rufino Lopez.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to speak on the issue of food. The South China Sea has been a traditional fishing ground since time immemorial for coastal states, the Philippines included. But action of China of late points to the fact that you have prevented fishermen from fishing, the destruction of marine environment by destroying coral reefs, and this somehow even harvesting of endangered species like giant clams. I'd like to hear from you, Mr. Defense Minister, how is this so? Because you are not only endangering the food security of your people, we have almost 2 billion people, plus the people of the coastal states. Thank you.
Anne-Marie Brady.
会商江您好，我想问2个问题。
General Wei, I'd like to ask a few questions on China's military activities in the Antarctic. I want to know if China will expand its logistics support by the PLA in the Antarctic, and about the Beidou satellite system, will it expand its coverage in the Antarctic?
Thank you very much, General Wei. I want to ask 2 questions about China's military activities in Antarctica.
No, we've got that translated
Got it?
perfectly well.
Excellent,
Absolutely, not to worry. Ernesto Brown.
Yes, Minister, you said that the construction of limited defense facilities in the South China Sea is legitimate. So legitimate, I think, in all interpretations means in accordance with the law. In this situation, of course, in accordance with international law. Now, China is also a party to the UN Convention on the Law of the Seas. Now, my question is, how can China reconcile these 2 things, and also add to that, of course, the ruling in The Hague in 2016 on the case of the Philippines against China. So that's my question. And also, how can this be seen as a win-win situation? To whom?
Thank you. Sophia Yan.
General Wei, under Chinese law, private companies like Huawei are obliged to work with the government. Can you please detail in what instances the Chinese Communist Party would ask private firms to work, to assist in matters of national security and national intelligence? One more thing, you gave a list in your speech of, quote, scars in tragedy in human civilization. So I must ask, June 4th on Tuesday marks the 30th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square crackdown. Will the PLA this year finally recognize what happened back then?
I'll take a couple more before we come back to General Wei and Khoa Pham.
Thank you. Khoa from Vietnam. General, is China committed to a legally binding code of conduct, COC? And if not, why not? And do you have a committed timeline to complete the COC? Thank you.
Alice Ekman.
Thank you very much, General, for your very interesting speech. You referred twice to colonial exploitation. Hearing your speech, I have the impression that it is fully in line with Mao Zedong non-alignment policy and in general term referring to Zhou Enlai's foreign policy. To what extent you agree with this impression? And you also refer several times to the centrality of the Communist Party of China. I think many in the room would doubt about the fact that China is still a communist country. What would you say to them concretely to convince them that China is still a communist country?
Thank you. Temsak Chalampalanungap. I think you might have turned off your, there you go.
Thank you, Dr. Shipman. I'm from the ASEAN Study Center. My question is about President Xi Jinping has been talking about China is now in a new long march. But you, General, this morning you are telling us that you are deploying military personnel in outposts in the South China Sea. Is there a contradiction here? You are actually forward deploying your military in the South China Sea in disputed area, not Chinese territory. But at the same time, your president is saying that China is retreating in a new long march. Is there any contradiction?
Michael Coe.
Oh, good. Thank you, John. General Wei, do you believe that the presence of concentration camps in Xinjiang may be contributing to a greater threat to Chinese national interests worldwide? And if that is the case, what is the PLA doing to respond? Thank you.
Jun Osawa.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. May I ask a question about the Chinese military strategy in cyber arena? General Wei, you mentioned China military strategy is the active defense and the non-fast strike policy. But in the cyber domain, it is difficult to find any border, and it is difficult to define the territory. So does Chinese PLA apply this active defense policy in cyber arena? And how to you apply your military strategy in the cyber arena as an active cyber defense? Thank you.
Thank you very much. General, is it all right if I take two more questions? Li Honghing.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. General Wei, there have been some rumors or allegations that China is seeking a military presence, maybe in Cambodia. Yesterday, in the Indo-Pacific Strategy Report released by the U.S. Defense Department, they have raised some concerns about this, and I think there have been some concerns among Southeast Asian countries about this rumor. So can you please confirm whether China is seeking a military presence in Cambodia or not? Thank you.
And finally, I'm sorry for the 11 people who I will have left out. I will keep you on the priority list for my next opportunity. So I'm disappointing 11 people, but I will ask Alexander Neil to ask the last question. except he's just turned off his microphone. Alex, there we go.
Thank you, John. A follow-up question regarding Xinjiang. We've heard Sangha from Sri Lanka mention the terrible atrocities occurring recently. My question is actually linked to the Chinese presence in Syria, in the Middle East, and the General referred to instability there. There are several hundred Uyghur fighters in Syria, and I'd like to ask the General, what threat does he think exists from returning fighters from Syria to China? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, General Wei, you've had another 10 questions or so. We've got about 5 minutes before we need to begin the next session, but I know that you've had time to think about all of these questions about Cambodia, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and the like. I wonder if you could give us some of your responses to those interesting questions.
If you give me enough time, I will answer all these questions. I will spend the entire time, the whole time of the second section to answer these questions. Actually, I didn't answer the question from the previous round on INF. Actually, the INF was established in a very positive atmosphere. That was very important INF, and one should not arbitrarily withdraw from it. And that is also a bilateral treaty, and it should not be arbitrarily expanded to other countries. And China is developing its capabilities in an appropriate and reasonable fashion, purely for self-defense, so we do not pose a threat to other countries. So I will give a simple answer to the questions just now. And we talk about, the question is about the strategy that China will not attack others unless attacked. I made it very clear just now. And if I need to go deeper into that, I will not have enough time to answer other questions. And about counterterrorism, terrorism is a common enemy to all of us. China is committed to working together with other countries to fight terrorism. This is our position, which is very consistent. There's no doubt about that, and China is a victim of terrorism. One question I want to ask here is that, what is the root cause of terrorism? What is the root cause of so many terrorists? Why, as counterterrorism efforts go on, the more serious terrorism has become? Why there are so many Afghan and Syrian terrorists? Why are so many terrorists in Libya? How has the Islamic State has been produced? Actually, terrorism is a common enemy, and we need to respond to the threat together. We should not adopt any double standards, right? Another question is about South China Sea or freedom of navigation. In terms of the South China Sea, which is a question attracted great attention, China has been committed to stability in the South China Sea. We are also committed to settling relevant issues by peaceful means through consultation. China has carried out some construction activities because some country has been acting recklessly and are not following rules. So we have to carry out some self-defense. Other people are threatening us, coming to our home all the time and threatening us. Why can't we develop some weapons to defend ourselves? This is purely reasonable. Well, we see the traffic police station on the streets, and so the cars shouldn't storm into those traffic police islands on the streets, right? Another question is about Huawei. In the interest of time, I will just answer some important questions. Huawei is a private company. China is opposed to the attempt of other countries to impose sanctions on private company. Huawei is not a military company. do not think that the head of Huawei used to serve in the army, then the company that he has built is part of the military. That doesn't make sense because this kind of ex-servicemen across boards, after their retirement from the military, a lot of them have set up companies in countries across the world. And some colleagues also raised questions about Xinjiang. To judge whether the policy of a country is good or not, I think there is a very important standard. We need to see whether people's lives have constantly improved and whether people are enjoying a secure and stable life. The policy of China on Xinjiang is absolutely right because over the past more than 2 years, there is no single terrorist attack in Xinjiang. The living standard of the local people has improved. The number of tourists to Xinjiang is about 150 million people. I visited Xinjiang last year. The average per capita GDP of Xinjiang people is $7,500 US dollars. So with such sound economic development, how can we say that Xinjiang is not developing in a good fashion? Xinjiang has carried out the vocational education and training center that is to ensure that there is no terrorist attacks, to help these people de-radicalized and help these people to learn some skills, then they can better get reintegrated into the society. Isn't it a good thing? Friends can visit Xinjiang and see the situation out there with their own eyes. Other questions have also been used, for example, about the satellite guiding system, which is independently developed by China, that is aimed to support the Chinese people, to support the Belt and Road Initiative. It can also serve the well-being of the whole world. So it is important to the development of the whole world. The question on the environment in the South China Sea, China is also committed to protecting the environment in the South China Sea. We have been stressing that one shouldn't carry out excessive development or utilization of South China Sea. It is important to preserve and restore the sound environment out there. Another question is about Cambodia. Cambodian friend is out there, and there is no such thing as for China to establish its military presence in Cambodia. There's no such thing out there. Another question is about the Tiananmen incident. This marks the 30th anniversary of that incident, and the 30 years have proven that under the leadership of the CPC, China has undergone major changes. How can we say that China didn't handle the Tiananmen incident properly? There is a conclusion of that incident. That incident was political turbulence, and the central government took measures to stop the turbulence, which is a correct policy. And because of the propaganda of the Chinese government, China has enjoyed stability and development. And if you visit China, you can better understand that part of history. And some colleagues also expressed a worry whether China wants to be the #1 in the world, become hegemon in the world. And yesterday, the Minister of Defense of Singapore put forward a point about the relationship between the grass and the elephant, and I said that China is the biggest developing country, while the US is the biggest developed country. China does not have the intention or capacity to vie for the #1 position in the world with the US. The US is a developed country, while China is a developing country. There is big difference in terms of the level of development between the two countries. And we are working for a community with a shared future for mankind, and we live on the same planet Earth. No one can survive and thrive without each other. All countries need to depend on each other for their own development. So we need to cooperate with each other enjoy harmony with each other and pursue common development. This is the only choice for the world. Conflict, confrontation between countries, including that between China and the US, does not serve the interests of the two peoples and doesn't serve the interests of the whole world. And I talked with Secretary Mattis in the past, and that was our consensus. And I also talked with Acting Secretary Shanahan. That was also a mutual understanding between us. China and the US are two major countries, and no one can defeat each other. A sound and stable relationship between the two countries, particularly a sound and stable relationship between the two militaries, are very important to the two sides. A stable male-to-male relationship is also important to the stability and peace of the whole region. Do I need to?
Should I answer more questions? Are there more questions?
The Antarctic.
咱们也得做一个交流。南极问题。
On the Antarctic. Okay. Antarctic and the Arctic are both the shared home of the humanity. They should serve the interests of all countries. China does not seek a military presence over there. I think I have answered all the important issues.
Why don't we conclude with your relations with Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka?
What happened in Sri Lanka, the terrorist attack, was a disaster for humanity. China is also a victim of terrorism. The violent terrorist attacks in Xinjiang was a scourge for us. I think the recent terrorist attack was a catastrophe for the Sri Lankan people. We need to strengthen our collaboration and coordination in finding the root cause of terrorism and fighting them. Terrorism is disaster for not just Sri Lanka, for Asia, but for the whole world, because they kill innocent people and they harm the results and interests of all countries. We need to work together to fight terrorism, and we should not discriminate against different forms of terrorism.
Thank you very much for your speech at the IISS Shangri-La Dialogue, the conversation that you have animated, your replies to all the questions. I have to say that there are at least a dozen people who would have liked to ask more questions. Perhaps when you attend the Shangri-La Dialogue next year, we will schedule 90 minutes for your session so that all the questions can be asked and all of the answers can be provided. I know that General Wei, you are here for the rest of the day in Singapore, and you have engaged a lot with our delegates, so perhaps some of the delegates who didn't have their questions answered formally in this hall, you can discuss with them outside in the corridor. But I want, on behalf of everyone attending the Shangri-La Dialogue, to thank you for your presence here and for the conversation and dialogue that you have had with us here in Singapore. Xi Xi, thank you.